it 10 second times the charm. Could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the Spring Bonnie suit like we see happen in FNAF 3? In a way it's possible, and it appears like that's the case in the FNAF novels, since William is described as having scars that are consistent with a Springlock failure before becoming Springtrap in the books. So could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason the Springlock suits were retired in the first place, since we hear of an unfortunate incident at the sister location? So is that unfortunate incident actually William? There are plenty of other people that it could be as well, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission, at least for a time. But with William continuing to use the suits afterwards and putting it on like we hear in FNAF 3, and then again he ends up failing in FNAF 3 as well, it's unlikely, so no. And at 9, Golden Fredbear. One theory that I've seen plenty of times, and I'm pretty sure mostly started around FNAF 4, was that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are the same animatronic, suggesting that the reason Golden Freddy is all limp and lifeless in the original FNAF and FNAF 2 is because his endoskeleton was removed after Crying Child's bite in 1983, and that's why the suit has to teleport around and cause hallucinations, because it can't physically move. This would also probably mean that Crying Child would be the one in the Golden Freddy suit. However, we know that this isn't true, based on characters being separate in Ultimate Custom Night, although I guess that might not mean much, and just like coloring and size. Since Golden Freddy is much smaller than Fredbear would have to be, since Fredbear would have to accommodate a human plus the robot parts, and Golden Freddy wouldn't, since, you know, Golden Freddy would just be an animatronic and not a Springlock suit. But honestly, at this point, the actual design doesn't really seem to matter much apparently, since Springtrap went to Scrap Trap and then went to Burn Trap. But from the evidence, it seems like Golden Freddy is merely an illusion or a hallucination created in the mind of Michael Afton. See our Golden Freddy was never real video for more info on that, because that proves this idea wrong. And you're all gonna be mad at me, but you know what? That video deserves more love, or at least interaction. And at 8, Elizabeth Afton. I've seen a few people asking if or assuming that Elizabeth Afton was a victim of a Springlock failure, and the truth is, she wasn't. The Circus Baby animatronic isn't a Springlock suit, since a Springlock suit in this case is defined as a suit that contains robotic parts, but uses a special mechanism that when cranked moves those robotic parts to the side so that a person can climb inside and wear the robot like a suit. The Baby animatronic isn't one of those, because there's no way to actually wear this animatronic. Baby it's just a robot, so there is no way that she could have Springlocked Elizabeth. Elizabeth is just a normal victim of her father's killing spree, which resulted in her somehow wanting to make him proud, despite him being the reason she's dead. Directly. Like, not even an, he just because he made the animatronic thing. No. Nobody else had a hand in her death aside from him. But she still wants to make him proud. I don't know, I guess Baby crushed her body and then her sanity too. Which, I mean, I'd understand. That's pretty rough. And it's 7, required. The Springlock suits themselves are an occupational hazard that they didn't really need to create. Like, these things are hella deadly, and both William and Henry allow for their employees to wear them. Like, goddamn, okay? Just make a separate suit for the animatronic characters. For the employees, okay? Like, the people who run your business. You know, they are the ones who make you the money, so, you know, they don't end up dying from robotic parts replacing their internal organs. OSHA would have been all over these goddamn suits if it was real in this universe, but apparently I guess it's not. And honestly, it's probably required by your contract to wear these suits at work, and if you refuse, you're probably gonna get fired, especially considering how they started getting ready to fire Jeremy because he saw Glitch Trap in Help Wanted. So why wouldn't they fire you for not wearing your suit if it's in your contract? Even if you claim it was to protect your life, they'd find another reason that you couldn't really fight against, so. Especially, you know, when a serial killer is the CEO. And it's 6, implications. Now, while the term Springlock is used in real life, it's totally different from the actual FNAF mechanism. I'm certain most of you got the whole Springlocks are real line from Springlocks and You, How Not to Die Remastered. It's a thread on the FNAF wiki. However, actual Springlocks are just locks that use springs, okay? From my research, what I gathered is that a Springlock in real life is, in simplest terms, a spring lock. It's like if your front door's deadbolt was on a spring. Every other instance talking about real spring locks or just ends up bringing you back or quotes this page, so it's kind of circular logic, okay? You can't use evidence within the thing that you're trying to prove as proof that it is real. It's like plugging a power bar into itself. It doesn't work. You can't use the same article to prove that Springlocks are real, okay? Because they're not. At least their game form isn't. But if the Springlock failure was real, I think the implications of, like, all of this being real in general is like one of the worst things. You get it? Like it's definitely in the top 10. Get it? It's a little meta content joke for you because this is a top 10 list. It's in the top 10. Halfway through into number 5, comments. I've mentioned this in previous videos, mostly to explain why there won't ever be an actual real FNAF restaurant that you'll be able to walk into, and it still remains true since we're only getting a virtual diner that you can only order online. However, I think that one of the worst things still, and especially when it comes to these suits, is the goddamn comments about them. You wanna know a comment that I saw yesterday? Well, yesterday for me as I was writing this, Wednesday for you. Okay, I saw someone say that they want to be spring-locked. What? Why? Why would you want to be spring-locked? Do you know how messed up that is? You're saying that you want to be killed by this thing? Because there's some hotlines that you should call. Like, why on sweet heaven's earth would you want to be spring-locked? Do you know how absolutely agonizingly painful that would be? That would be one of the worst things imaginable, okay? Holy sweet Lord baby Jesus W. Christ. That would be one of the worst ways to go, if not the worst way. At least like as far as like actually could happen goes, I think at least, okay? Because like a volcano would suck, but it's a bit unrealistic. It's a bad idea, okay? Stop doing this. Stop saying this. Okay, talk to a doctor. Getting close to the end of number 3, not beefed up. The fact that these animatronics are incredibly powerful is absolutely an insane thing that nobody really seems to grasp. Like the fact that Fredbear was able to crush a child's skull, something that we've covered how crazy is. Imagine if that was an employee, okay? Like ignoring the fact that you think it's a Springlock incident or that it's a Springlock suit, the amount of power that Jaw has is a hazard for everyone who comes into contact with it. Like goddamn. And before you say anything, okay, it wasn't a Springlock failure. I don't know how many times I need to go over that. There's no Springlocks in the mouth, and they weren't active at the time. Okay, it can't be a Springlock failure. So these animatronics are just insanely powerful animatronics, alright? Which would be explained by them being intended to kill, which also explains why it would have the power to crush crying child's skull. The way I see it, William probably wanted to use the Fredbear suit as his kill suit because, you know, Freddy's the more popular character, but then he had to change to Bonnie after, you know, his son was killed in the suit, especially considering how he saw Elizabeth end up possessing Baby, so he was probably worried that Crying Child did the same with Fredbear, so yeah, that's the way I see it. But ultimately, in number 2, Springlocks are real. Okay, you see, if I was to actually do like a cosplay of the purple guy and actually do it without it being a joke, I'd probably end up using a purple phone case because, you know, you gotta reference the phone guy. But I don't need a Springlock crank because those aren't actually a thing in real life. While the term Springlock is used in real life, it is a totally different mechanism from the actual FNAF thing, okay? I'm certain most of you got the whole Springlocks are real line from the Springlocks and You How Not to Die remastered thread on the FNAF wiki. However, actual Springlocks are just locks that use springs. From my research, what I gathered was that a Springlock in real life is in the simplest of terms if your front door's deadbolt was on a spring. Every other instance talking about real Springlocks just simply brings you back to that page or quotes that page, so there's really only one source. Springlocks, as they're used in the games, do not exist in real life, alright? That is a myth. The term is used, but it's 2 separate words instead of one, and they mean totally different things. So please stop. And finally, in at number 1, Cassidy. Cassidy is the most mysterious victim in the missing children's incident. Her name was hidden for years, only being revealed in the survival logbook of all things, and then confirmed in the FNAF movie scripts that Scott ended up tossing after he talked about them on Reddit. And honestly, we don't really know much about her. We don't know how she died, but there are plenty of theories that claim to have evidence of her being a Springlock victim. Maybe William knew that it would be easier that way, I don't know. Maybe she ends up possessing Golden Freddy after all, I don't know, okay? We figured that he could be a Springlock suit and then that he had like the guts removed or something like that, hence the slumped over nature as I talked about earlier, but if this was the case and Cassidy's body was in that suit, wouldn't they have found it when they were gutting it? Because like, that seems like something you'd notice. I don't know, but maybe William was the one who gutted it, considering how he was the suit technician. But for a suit technician, he also did, you know, get into the animatronic when it was wet, something that he was definitely smart enough to avoid. But yeah, Cassidy being a Springlock victim has very little evidence, if you can even call it evidence though, so yeah, I'm definitely gonna deem this one a myth. Light your torches, get your pitchforks, come at me in the comments section for saying that, because I know you're going to. I can't avoid it every time, but you're not going to change the outcome of this video, alright? It's already uploaded. You can't change it. It's too late. In a 10 Springtrap. I believe we all know this story by now, okay? Everything was going well at first. They couldn't pin him down, and he was on his way to immortality. Once William discovered Remnant, however, he spiraled. He wanted to use it to fuel his life and make him truly immortal. So, in an effort to study it further, William lures the possessed animatronics to a back room that they can't normally access, and then uses it to dismantle them, planning to melt down their endoskeletons to make soul-infused metal. However, by doing this, he unknowingly releases the souls of the victims that he claimed so long ago, and seeing these victims causes William to panic. Understandably, I mean, they're freaking ghost kids, and they're also the ghosts of kids that you killed, so yeah, then this absolute animatronic genius, the technician that has made the suits, handles the suit maintenance, and explained to every employee the proper procedure for putting these Springlock suits on, climbs into the Spring Bonnie suit that he actually uses to kill, and then climbs inside in such a panic that he actually didn't notice the moisture in the room, the leaking ceiling, and, you know, literally everything else, probably also his sweat, which caused the Springlocks that were active in this moment, since it was in suit mode, to fail. And I feel like that moment is one of the most confusing mysteries. Why did he do that? He knows better. If he can avoid the cops for that long, why did he think that this was all just gonna be fine? Dude. And it's 7 Kelsey. The New Kid from 1:35 AM is a story from 3rd Fazbear Frights book. The story revolves around Devin, Mick, and Kelsey. Devin and Mick are outcasts. They aren't really popular, you know, they aren't cool. But when the new kid Kelsey arrives at their school, they try to make a new friend. Despite Kelsey being charismatic and adored by everyone in the school, over time Devin grows jealous of Kelsey, because, you know, he's adored and loved by everyone in the school. So, in an act of revenge, or to maybe try to gain control over him, Devin hatches a plan to lure Kelsey to an abandoned Freddy Fazbear's to trap him in a Springlock suit for a few hours. I guess to try to humble him, I guess? I don't know why you thought that this would be a good thing, but obviously the plan goes horribly wrong because it's a FNAF book. After getting in the suit, the Springlocks ended up failing, as expected, because it's a FNAF book, causing all of the blood to soak into the fur of the animatronic and pool around the ground. Devin and Mick leave Kelsey for dead so that they won't get in trouble, but then something doesn't feel right. So a week later, Devin returns to the scene of the crime to make sure Kelsey's body is still there. He sticks his hand in the animatronic's mouth because he doesn't think about fingerprints, and snap. The Springlocks fail yet again, as per usual, and Devin gets his hand stuck inside the suit and bleeds out. But not before seeing a body in the suit, with black hair instead of Kelsey's blonde hair. I don't know, okay? Could this be a character that we have yet to see in the games? Probably not. It's just a character in the book, alright? This doesn't happen in the games, okay? It's a myth. This is just a book thing, okay? Stop. And it's 6, unintentional. You see, there are a decent amount of people that for some reason think that these Springlock suits were made with pure intentions by William Afton. This kind of goes hand in hand with the idea that William started killing after losing his kids, but we know that that is not the case. Since thanks to the fast facts found in FNAF AR's files, we know that the Funtime animatronics were some of the first ones ever made. And considering the abilities of Baby, at the very least, we know that these were made in order to kill. We know that was a thought in his brain, meaning that even if the Springlock animatronics were the very first animatronics ever, it's reasonable to think that they were also designed with death in mind, which explains multiple things. More on one of them in a minute, but honestly, if William made the Funtimes with death in mind, it's likely that he did the same with the Springlocks. And if you think that a suit that can snap at a moment's notice and shove pounds of metal bars, cogs, gears, and more into the same place your body would take up, was made with pure intentions, then you need therapy more than I do, okay? I have some numbers you can call. Especially when a normal animatronic and then a suit for your employees would be cheaper and less likely the focus of a lawsuit. Speaking of which, halfway through in number 5, liability. The Springlock mechanism is probably the most intuitive thing that FNAF's world invented. The ability to move robotic parts out of the way with enough room for a human to fit inside is insane, and while it may be dangerous, we also drive over 100 kilometers an hour in huge giant metal death boxes, so maybe we can't really complain. While yes, they do have their faults, there's nothing compared to the ability to be both animatronic and human suit. It's an incredible feat of technology, even if just absolutely the dumbest idea ever. Because it's terrifying for the same reasons that it would be in game. Someone can dress in it and pretend to be a robot, okay? It can clamp down on you in any second, and it has done so multiple times before. The Springlock suits themselves are an occupational hazard that they did not need to end up creating, but like, I don't know, like these things are so hella deadly. Why would both William and Henry allow for their employees to wear them? Especially Henry, like goddamn. Just make a separate suit for the animatronic, okay? Like make a separate suit that your employee can wear. It's the employees, the people who run your business. They make you money, so that, you know, they don't end up dying from robotic bits replacing their, you know, normal human organic bits in a hot suit that fails when it gets moist. You know, sweat, breathing. Yeah, I would never get in one of those things. Even if there hadn't been an incident before, okay, that just seems like a lawsuit waiting to happen. And I don't want to be the one whose family sues because I'm too dead to do it myself, alright? So, no. It's a myth that they shouldn't have gotten sued. In it for Crying Child. Okay, now this one's certainly gonna make people mad, but there's no way that I could do this list without mentioning the greatest debate of literally anyone yelling at me ever. The amount of people who have messaged me on Instagram or on TikTok, yelling at me in my TikTok comments or in the YouTube comments, telling me that the bite of 83 is somehow a Springlock incident bothers me to my core. I say this every time I bring it up. It's not a Springlock failure, okay? The fact that a load of people consider this to be a Springlock failure is the myth that I'm addressing. The reason I don't think it was a Springlock failure is because the FREDBEAR suit was already in animatronic mode, okay? There's no Springlocks that could have a chance of failing, since, you know, a Springlock failure refers to the Springlock mechanisms failing to hold the robotic bits away, meaning that it snaps back into animatronic mode when a person's inside. That's why it's bad if there's a person inside, and there would be no Springlock mechanisms inside the mouth either, because that would always be in animatronic mode. Like your head, your eyes would line up with the opening of the mouth so that, you know, you could see. So yeah, that's kind of. Plus, I don't think anyone who is 7 feet tall working at Freddy Fazbear's. No, they're in the NBA. The jaw also just moves up and down, okay? Truthfully, I don't know how much of the community believes this to be a Springlock incident, because the comments are always going to be filled with more people that are against it than for it, because if you're for it, you don't really feel the need to comment about it. But it's still concerning the amount of comments I'm seeing and the amount of DMs I get on Instagram, okay? Which, by the way, follow me on if you don't hate me, because I need to get past 20. I get to 19 and it goes back down. I need to get past the 120, you know? Getting close to the end. Into number 3, Golden Fredbear. One theory I've seen plenty of times, and I'm pretty sure was mostly the start of FNAF 4 theory, was that Golden Freddy and Fredbear are the same animatronic, suggesting that the reason Golden Freddy is all limp in the original FNAF and FNAF 2 is because his endoskeleton was removed after Crying Child's bite in 1983, and that's why the suit has to teleport around and cause hallucinations, because it can't actually move. This would also probably mean that Crying Child was the one in the Golden Freddy suit. However, we know that this isn't true based on the characters being separate in Ultimate Custom Night and not just coloring and size, since Golden Freddy is much smaller than Fredbear would have been, since, you know, Fredbear would have to accommodate a human and Golden Freddy wouldn't, since he would just be an animatronic and not a Springlock suit. But honestly, at this point, the actual design doesn't really seem to matter, since Springtrap went to Scrap Trap and then to Burn Trap, so honestly, it's all up in the air. However, I have yet to see proper substantial evidence of this being the case, and I don't think that they would have removed the endoskeleton before that. But ultimately, into number 2, Shadow Animatronics. One of the oldest theories is that the Shadow Animatronics are the first Springlock victims, and this comes to us after the FNAF 3 phone guide dialogue that mentioned multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures, which some interpreted as multiple Springlock suits failing at once, since the term Springlock in this situation is being used to describe the suit as a whole and not the actual individual mechanisms that make up the suit. So, the line of multiple and simultaneous Springlock failures could mean multiple of the Springlocks inside the suit failing at the same time, or just multiple suits failing. This led some to theorize that previous employees were killed in the Springlock suit, which is where the Shadow Animatronics come from. This is supported by the fact that these are both shadows of Freddy and Bonnie, the two animatronics that have Springlock versions. I mean, there are some holes in this theory, because, you know, one of them looks like Toy Bonnie, and Toy Bonnie's not a Springlock suit, but there is potential that this is the case, because again, designs consistency doesn't really seem to matter anymore. And finally, in at number 1, Double Trouble. Could William have suffered a Springlock failure before getting trapped in the Springlock Bonnie suit that we see in FNAF 3? It is possible, okay, and it certainly appears like this could be the case in the FNAF novels. Well, it is the case in the FNAF novels, but because of that, it could be the case in the games. Since William in the books is described to have scars that are consistent with a Springlock failure before actually becoming Springtrap in the books. So, could it have happened in the games? Could William have been the reason that the Springlock suits were actually retired? Since we do hear of the unfortunate incident at a sister location, so is that unfortunate incident instead William? There are plenty of people that it could be, but William having to deal with it would certainly get them put out of commission, because you know, he's kind of up there, and I mean, he doesn't really seem to care about anyone else, so if they failed on them, why would he retire them? But with William continuing to use the suit and putting it on after, you know, when like the room was wet in FNAF 3, this could be unlikely unless he just doesn't have the capacity for trauma, but it's still possible either way, okay? So since this list is about mysteries, I feel like this deserves to be on it. And you know what? Be the capstone. In at 9, Grim Fredbear. Grim Fredbear is one of the antagonists in Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awoken. He's only active on night 5 and is found by the left hallway. Grim Fredbear resembles the normal golden Fredbear, only with his suit glowing a deep purple color, while the interior of the suit glows a bright white. His upper face appears to be torn off, including his eyes, leaving an empty, hollow, gaping hole in its place, and the inside of the mask, though it appears like there is nothing inside, actually conceals a white, pale human head that can only be seen during the jump scare. And before you ask, yes, it's mine. I was going to make that a joke, but I actually wrote that into the script. Holy crap. This animatronic is clearly meant to be a reference to Shadow Freddy and the theory that the Shadow animatronics are Springlock victims, which was confirmed to be false by Scott when he stated that William was a Springlock failure, but still, okay? On the museum level of Final Nights, which unlocks after night 5, it is revealed that Grim Fredbear is a Springlock victim, saying, quote, another Springlock failure victim, the second generation of Fredbear. In at 8, FREDTRAP. To be honest, I searched this up just for the hell of it, and there actually are FREDBEAR versions of Springtrap, which is kinda cool, but I mean, kind of expected. FREDTRAP is exactly what you would expect. Springtrap's look on a yellow Freddy animatronic. The designs are actually really well made and honestly are scarier than normal Springtrap for me. I mean, I don't know, I guess for some reason I think bears are scarier than rabbits. Don't know why I would think that. But I think that Scott made William use the Spring Bonnie suit because of how scared Scott himself was of it, but that could also just be idle speculation. There's another theory that I have that maybe he was going to use the FREDBEAR animatronic, but then after his son got killed by it, he switched to Bonnie. There are also even more rundown versions and even scrap versions of FREDTRAP, which are already haunting when you don't think about the fact that it would still be William inside the suit being kept alive by the spirit of his dead kid. Yeah, so FREDBEAR is definitely one of the more strangely unique versions that I've seen for this list, and you know what? I'm pretty damn impressed. These designs are pretty good. And at 7, Henry Emily. Now this is certainly an interesting case because seemingly Henry has died multiple ways across FNAF canons, with his first apparent death being in FNAF World at the hands of Baby. His death in the novels seems to have happened before the Silver Eye starts, and then he dies in FNAF 6 along with everything else. But could one of these deaths involve a Springlock failure or something having to do with Springlocks? I mean, maybe AFTON offed Henry in one of these realities, finally actually, you know, took care of his worst enemy, or maybe Baby has some Springlock mechanisms that's inside of her that she used to kill Henry. I mean, hell, maybe Henry just climbed into the wrong suit at the wrong time, or maybe the right suit at the right time for him. It's a question that we don't really pay attention to because, I mean, Henry's death doesn't mean much to the story, unfortunately. I mean, it's true, it doesn't. Henry dying doesn't really mean much overall for the FNAF lore, okay? We didn't even know that he was alive until FNAF 6, for God's sakes. So maybe for irony's sake, Scott had him bite the dust in a quicker way rather than just burning him alive. And at 6, Phone Guy. Phone Guy's death is one of the most mysterious deaths of all time, okay? We hear him die in FNAF 1 on night 4 with the sounds of multiple animatronics banging at his doors, but we never really get an explanation as to what happens to him. We know that he dies, but other than that, it's all speculation. One of the theories is that the animatronics got him and shoved him into a suit, resulting in a painful death, especially since at this point the Springlock suits were either still in operation or hadn't been totally temporarily removed. The actual timeline of events for the Springlock suits is a little messy since we don't really have the exact years for the things getting scrapped, yet it's still possible that Phone Guy was shoved into one, or maybe he tried to use it to hide. After all, maybe Phone Guy is secretly William Afton and Scott just doesn't want us to know that yet or something, and what we hear could just be the FNAF 3 cutscene. I mean, I doubt it, but it would be absolutely hilarious if he ended up pulling that on us, okay? And for all those saying that Phone Guy can't be Afton because Afton is British or whatever, so is Tom Holland, okay? It's called acting. You can fake an accent, especially if you're a serial killer who's trying to evade everything, you know? Kinda, yeah, it's a thing. In at 4, the Bite of 87. The Bite of 87 is such an infamous incident that I can already hear people groaning in the comments. However, what if the victim of the Bite of 87, whoever that was, is actually a victim of a Springlock failure? It could make sense, since the animatronics had no real harmful tendencies before this, so a Springlock failure is a reasonable assumption as to why someone got a frontal lobe removed. And a Springlock failure would definitely provide enough power to do that, since, you know, the Springlocks themselves would snap with a ferocious velocity, and would probably circumvent the whole needing more power to actually crush a skull thing. And if it was Jeremy, it would explain why the animatronics ended up getting suspended, because now one of their own employees was bit and then they had to promote him and then fork over some extra cash to make sure that he didn't sue. So yeah, was the Bite of 87 a Springlock failure? Maybe. And was it the moment that caused the Springlock suits to be retired? I don't know. Okay, it also could have been the FNAF 4 bite. But considering the FNAF 3 phone calls, it actually seems to be this bite though, since in FNAF 2 we hear about someone using one of the yellow suits and not mentioning the Springlocks until FNAF 3, meaning that they were probably still in use normally come 1985, and Crying Child died in 1983, so it was probably the Bite of 87 that got them suspended, so there you go. Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Reaper Spring Bonnie. Reaper Spring Bonnie, however, is the opposite of Stage Bonnie. This Reaper variant appears in Final Nights 3 and 4 and is an absolute monstrosity, but it's definitely more terrifying in Final Nights 4, so let's focus on that one. He is 100% the scariest animatronic in this series. In essence, Reaper Spring Bonnie is a nightmare spring trap. He has sharp teeth and a very damaged and withered body. His suit is dark yellow in color. He sports a big purple bow tie on his upper chest, kind of like Glitch Trap. And then, like the other Reaper animatronics, Reaper Spring Bonnie has one pair of hollow, dark eyes that will steal your soul. I added that last part, but it's probably true. In Final Nights 4, his appearance is much more disfigured and gruesome, with sharper teeth, sharper claws, a different jaw, growths on his shoulders resembling fungi, and, you know, a kind of a gooier appearance overall. It's like the slime girl from YouTube if she made a FNAF character. He's also missing half of his right ear like Springtrap in FNAF 3, and his suit is more greenish in color this time around to be more like Springtrap. And oh my god, this thing is still terrifying, and it's more terrifying than Springtrap, okay? This is what Springtrap should have been, or honestly, this is what I think like a Nightmare Springtrap would look like, okay? This is like a prototype Burn Trap in my eyes, or the way I'm thinking, like Melt Trap, the next iteration of Afton. But ultimately, in at number 2, Garvey. A psychopathic, cold-blooded killer, he stopped being human long ago. That's how Garvey is described in the extras of Dormitibus, okay? Garvey is the penultimate antagonist in Dormitibus. As a human, he was the man who murdered the missing children and later went on to get trapped in Spring Bonnie, becoming Springtrap. He was then burnt to a permanent death in the Fazbear Fright's fire, unlike our William Afton, but that's not only where he differs, because Garvey is more gooey, and he's a more gooey or gory version of Springtrap from FNAF 3. And it's also actually not William Afton, since this game was released before the official name reveal, even before FNAF 4. So yeah, he's Springtrap, but with hardly any exosuit or animatronic casing, whatever you end up wanting to call it. He crawls on all fours and uses his left hand as a foot and his left foot as a hand, like some demon monkey from hell that even Satan doesn't want around, okay? He's like trying to like send it away. He's like, yeah, no, don't. Like, you're seeing pictures, okay? Like, tell me, do you think that it shouldn't be on this list, okay? Because if you're saying that, you're lying. I can tell. And finally, in at number 1, you. Spoiler alert for a fan game. The fan game, which if I say the name will spoil it, so if you want to avoid spoilers, just go to the bloopers, but like, thanks for watching. But either way, I'll give you the chance to do that. Okay, there we go. That was your chance. You're done. A Shadow Over Freddy's is a FNAF fan game created by Fiznam on Game Jolt. It was released on the 25th of April 2018. And you know, since it was made by the same guy who is currently working on FNAF Plus for the FazBear fanverse, you know it's gonna be good. The gameplay of A Shadow Over Freddy's is a hybrid between a traditional point-and-click game and a free-roaming horror game. The player wakes up to find themselves with no memories in a black and white abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and is tasked with surviving 5 nights and escaping the restaurant. The player is given a different set of tasks each night and must complete said tasks before 6 AM and without being attacked by any roaming animatronics. However, the ending of this game has you getting trapped in a Springlock suit and left to rot, meaning that you are a Springlock victim, which is probably the scariest victim of them all. I don't know about you, some of you I do because I've seen the comments, but I would rather not get Springlocked. It's also revealed that you are William Afton in this game, but you know what, it's you, so it's good enough for me. And at 10, moisture sensitive. One of the things that I find to be the absolute dumbest thing about not only these damned suits, but also the FNAF series in general, is how stupid it is that the Springlock mechanisms inside the Springlock suits fail with moisture. Sure, it explains why William gets Springlocked because the room was dripping and whatever, the ceiling was leaking, and it makes everyone confused with Crying Child because he was crying. Despite that not being a Springlock failure, everyone thought it was because he was crying and, you know, moisture. But in actual practice, that is a horribly flawed mechanic. Like, if me breathing and sweating is going to make the metal bits snap on me, why would I do it in a hot robotic suit? That seems like a horrible and stupid idea. Like, yes, okay, put me in a hot and sweaty environment that gets me killed if it gets wet. That's not a liability at all. I get sweaty wearing my freaking Doctor Strange costume, okay? Imagine a giant suit full of metal, okay? That would also be heavy as hell to walk around in too, only making the sweating worse. In at 9, designer. You see, there are a decent amount of people that for some reason think that these Springlock suits were made with pure intentions. By William Afton. This kind of goes hand in hand with the idea that William started killing after losing his kids, but we know that that's not the case. Since thanks to the fast facts found in FNAF AR's files, we know that the Funtime animatronics were some of the first ones ever made, and considering the abilities of Baby and her comrades, we know that they were made in order to kill, meaning that even if the Springlock animatronics were the very first animatronics ever, it's reasonable to assume that they were also designed with death in mind, which explains multiple things. But honestly, if William made the Funtimes with death in mind, it's likely that he did the same with the Springlocks, you get me? And if you think that a suit that can snap at a moment's notice and shove pounds of metal, bars, cogs, gears, and chains and more into the same space as your body would be made with pure intentions, you should stop watching these videos and go to a therapist. Seriously. I have a number. In at 8, no bonus. The Springlock mechanism is probably the most intuitive thing that FNAF's world invented. The ability to move robotic parts out of the way enough for a human to fit inside is nuts. And while it may be dangerous, we also drive over 100 kilometers or miles, whatever, per hour in huge metal death boxes, so we can't necessarily complain about it. And while yes, they have their faults, there is nothing compared to the ability to be both animatronic and suit. That's an incredible feat of technology, and I'm sure they play into it with the marketing. Like, I mean, we hear the Foam Guy tapes from FNAF 3 talking about these things, okay? And he never mentions a bonus or anything like that for you risking your life with one of these damn suits. And even if you end up getting Springlocked, there doesn't really seem to be any compensation package for your loved ones. Hell, if you die, you may not even get your severance. Actually, maybe that's why they do it. Your family can file a lawsuit since, you know, you died on the job, but that's a lengthy court battle against a massive company with a serial killer who has yet to be caught at the front lines. It's not really gonna do much good for your fam. So the fact that you don't get a bonus if you get in one of these suits, let alone get Springlocked, no thanks. It's a red flag. Swipe left. In at 7, Shadow Spring Bonnie. Shadow Spring Bonnie is one of the 2 primary antagonists of Final Nights 2. He is one of the final animatronics in the game. Shadow Spring Bonnie resembles Springtrap, as to be expected when mentioning Springlock suits, but similar to Springtrap, he lacks the suit on his feet and has a majority of his right ear missing. Overall, he has rips, but not any real missing limbs or parts at all, which is a stark contrast to the burnt animatronics in the first 4 nights of this game. His face glows white, which is noticeable when he's in the hallway, but also gives him a more sinister appearance, and pushes the something supernatural that most of the Shadow animatronics have, like with Shadow Bonnie from FNAF AR. Shadow Spring Bonnie takes the role of Burnt Freddy and Burnt Foxy on Night 5, which means that he's very fast, so the player needs to seal the vent quickly, otherwise you'll get jump scared. He also may appear in the hallway, but if he does, never use your flashlight, otherwise you'll get insta-killed. Instead, you need to inspect his face when he appears there, and if he's twitching, close the door. A rattling sound will be heard so that you know he's left. And the fact that you need to look at his face to see if you're in danger just makes this even scarier, especially considering the fact that most of what you need to do relies on fast reflexes, and then you're just sitting there trying to figure out if he's really twitching or if that's just you going crazy. Not from personal experience, I don't know. What? In its 6th Golden Call. As a human, when alive, Golden Call's name was Kyle. However, now he is a Springlock victim stuck inside a Golden Freddy Springlock suit. Golden Call has the typical rundown Springlock suit vibe, similar to Springtrap. However, this is even more gruesome. His left ear is bent, he has bugs coming out of basically every hole in his body, human eyes are hanging out of the animatronics' eye sockets, he's missing the exosuit on his right foot, and his character is holding a flesh-colored, at least colored, it's probably flesh-made, let's be honest, phone in his right hand that stays stuck to his head via more flesh or like blood tendril strands connecting to the side of his head, okay? It's horrifying. It's a monstrosity. And looking at his age on the wiki, Kyle was only 5 years old when he got spring-locked, which is absolutely nuts and just flat out horrible. So yeah, it's unfortunate. Yikes. This kid could have been the next best Fortnite player. Halfway through into number 5, GRIMM CHICA. The first Springlock victim in the Final Nights series, GRIMM CHICA is the primary antagonist in Final Nights 3 Nightmares Awaken. Unlike the others though, she is not a Reaper animatronic. GRIMM CHICA holds a strong appearance to the Springlock suits on the poster in the Night 3 cutscene, but her faceplates are very hard to spot. She's also almost entirely purple. The glowing accents inside her suit resemble a human corpse. She lacks a bib unlike the original CHICA, and overall her body is very slim like the original toy CHICA, except for her hips, which appear to be much wider, which is making me all sorts of confused. And she lacks shoulders or upper arms, with her forearms protruding from her armpits. So yeah, not confused anymore. GRIMM CHICA is also revealed to be a Springlock victim in the museum level, saying, quote, a victim of a Springlock failure, forever forced to haunt the suit she was wearing, now being manipulated by your sister and mother, tried spray on tan, still very pale. Why is this relatable to me? Why are these two the two Springlock victims from Final Nights 3 so relatable? No matter what I'll do, I'm always gonna be pasty, and you know what, I'm okay with that. However, I did rank this above GRIMM FREDBEAR because it's CHICA. And look at how they massacred my baby! Oh man, I'm sorry mommy. These transgressions will not be accepted. In at 4, Am I Real? Am I Real, also known as Cake Bear, is presumably the primary and most recurring antagonist in Dormitibus. Am I Real has 2 different forms. His first form is Cake Bear, and Cake Bear's design originated from the Save Him minigame, where he delivered cake to children while someone is being killed outside. He's the predecessor to both FREDBEAR and Freddy Fazbear, but Cake Bear is a brown bear animatronic that also acts as a Springlock suit that appears in most of the main nights. Although they look slightly similar, the only similarities it really has to Freddy is that they both possess a top hat, are brown, have blue eyes, and are a bear, which I mean I guess is the whole character. Am I Real's second form is the form that resembles Springtrap. This form has a green color much like Springtrap does and actually contains human remains. Great. His right eye socket has gotten bigger on the side and there's a big hole that can be seen on the right side of his head. His top hat has received some withering because you know it has a corpse inside. His lower jaw is slanted and worn down. He doesn't have it's not circular like Cake Bear's. He has a sizable hole in the right side of his torso as well, revealing organs. He has rips and tears covering his arms, revealing more human remains, and he just appears to be missing like a finger on his right hand for whatever reason. And you know what? No matter what, it's still terrifying to look at. And of course, 3 out of 10 of these are going to be from Dormitibus, okay? Because have you ever played Dormitibus? Have you seen these guys? They're terrifying. Just wait. Paperwork. One of the worst things for the survivors after a Springlock failure has to be the paperwork that is associated with it, because goddamn. Someone dying in your building is one thing. Someone dying in your building because of something in your building is another, and then add on to that the fact that they were your employee and probably forced into that suit without because of their contract, and you'll be filing reports until you have to retire. Okay, especially because one mistake on those papers means like even more paperwork, and I don't really know anyone who likes to do paperwork. Personally, I hate it, but that's also because my ADHD makes me it makes it unbearable for me, honestly. Like, it's even tough to write scripts sometimes, but I mean, eventually I have to. But like that's where my brain thrives, you know, in that stressful environment, which is not good for my health. But if it was that kind of paperwork, I would honestly just quit, because there was no way in hell that I would even want to attempt to keep my focus on that when I can just scroll through TikTok or YouTube instead. So yeah, no thanks. But ultimately, in at number 2, replaced. Oh yeah, don't forget your bones being replaced with metal ones. Yeah, like sure, there's surgery for people who need repairs or replacements, okay? I think like hip replacements are probably the most common actually. However, those have whole processes behind them to ensure a fast recovery and, you know, survival, not being infected. All of a sudden being shoved full of metal bones where normal ones used to be, that's a guaranteed infection at the very least, especially considering how, you know, your normal bones have to go somewhere else. And whether they're just crushed and then spread out inside you or just pushed out the other side, you're going to be in a hell of a lot of pain. Plus, you know, probably not alive, which I guess is a good thing, since you won't really have to deal with the intense pain for too long, hopefully. But this actually makes me think, if you replace all of your bones with metal ones, are you still you? Is this like a Ship of Theseus moment? Am I about to have like a WandaVision finale? Or like, are we just our brain? And if we are our brain, does that mean that if we have a brain transplant, do we become another person despite it still being my body? And does that mean that we're just like a brain piloting a bone mech with meat armor? Oh no, existential crisis! And finally, in at number 1, death. I mean, don't get me wrong, okay? But the worst thing about a Springlock failure has to be the whole death part, right? Ignore my mumbling. I mean, honestly, okay, it's obviously not for some of you, given the whole comments thing earlier, but the only reason you wouldn't die in a Springlock suit is because you're a main character and need to be around for the story. And then you're just in agonizing pain for the rest of your life. Yeah, the only people who have survived a Springlock failure, well, confirmed, is William. So, yeah, and you know, he's like the main antagonist of the game and was only able to survive since the spirit of a victim was keeping him alive. And in the books, William also ended up getting springlocked before, but then got out of the suit, since Dave Miller, who is revealed to be William, has scars from a previous Springlock failure from before he becomes Springtrap in the books. So the only one who can ever really survive seems to be William, and he's survived it twice. Anyone else is boned, and personally, I'd rather not die by having millions of small metal bits and several dozen large ones shoved into my body, trying to replace my body. I would rather die peacefully in my sleep with Chica's hand around my throat.